Background, Rabbi. It's the real deal.
Right, all right. Oh, Chavre, today's a very important daf. Mamish, wow. Here we go. With the help of Hashem, we are learning PESACHIM daf Samach Zayin. Right, we left off learning the pasuk that Reish Lakish brought. We'll go back to the Machloikas before we begin the Gemara inside between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish. But we left off with the pasuk that Rabbi Yechanan brought, a pasuk in Parshas Nasai, from where Reish Lakish learns that Pesach, the Korban Pesach, is brought if the majority of either the Yidden are Tamei, that the Korban Pesach is going to be brought even if the majority of the Kohanim are Tamei, or as we mentioned, even if the Yidden are Tahir, the Kohanim are Tahir, but the majority of the Klei are not, Pesach is Doiche Tumah. Now, really, we made a Gzeira Shava that linked the Korban Tamid and the Pesach, and the Gemara began telling us that how do we know that Tamid is Doiche Tumah? Meaning, if the majority of the Kohanim that are doing the Avodah are Tamid, they bring the Tamid nonetheless, they learn it Mayada from Pesach, Pesach Gufei Minalan. We're going to repeat Rabbi Yechanan because we'll have to know this for later, for the daf later. Reish Lakish brought a pasuk in Parshas Nasai, and what we're going to start discussing is that we have different types of tummy people. The three categories is going to be a Metzoira, we're going to have a Zov, and we're going to have a Tamei Mace. Now, most people, a Tamei Mace, you have to wait 7 days, and you have to have the Hazah on the 3rd and the 7th day, which is unique to Tamei Mace. Many people view that as the most Chamer, and in certain aspects, it is. But as far as the din that we're going to start focusing on, which is the pasuk in Parshas Nasai, which is from which machne does that type of tamidik a person needs to be banished from. And like we mentioned, there are three machnes. You have machne shchina. Machne shchina is the azara. You have machne levia in the Mishkan during the times of the Midbar. Well, the Mishkan was the shchina, and machne levia was Pashat, where the Levium lived around the Mishkan. Once we entered Eretz Yisrael, Machne Levia is Har Habayis, and Machne Yisrael would be in the Midbar where all the Yidden lived. Once we moved to Eretz Yisrael, any and all walled cities, and Bachlal in Halacha, when we speak about a walled city, we speak about a walled city that was walled Miyamais Yeshua ben Nun. Let's focus on Yerushalayim, but it's not only Yerushalayim, that is called Machne Yisrael. And it's amazing. What we will learn today is that when a Metzoira has to be banished from the camps, the Metzoira is banished the most. He has to be kicked out, so to say, banished even from Machne Yisrael until he becomes purified. Zav, interestingly, a Zav has to be banished from two Machnes. Not only may a Zav not enter the Azara or the Makim HaMikdash, a Zav may not be on the Har Habayis, and it is a Tamei Mace, which again, for certain dinim, he's the most Tamei. He has to undergo so many things to become Tar. Nevertheless, a Tamei Mace is only banished from the Machne Shchina. A Tamei Mace is allowed to go on Har Habayis. And as the Gemara is going to point out, not only can a Tamei Mace be on Machne Levia, a mace itself is allowed to be in Machne Levia. Like Moshe Rabbeinu had with him the Atzmais Yosef. Amazing. Okay. Now, Rab Chizda, all of that is going to be linked to the pasuk that Reish Lakish brings, and a lot more. Rab Chizda, the Amayda, makes a statement that if a Metzoira will enter the Machne, that means he's going to enter a place where he should have been banished from. And since the Torah says he's not allowed to be there, you might have thought that he's going to get Malchus. Rab Chizda says he's Pater mi Malchus, and we're going to have a very unique lav shenitak la'asei. Normally, there's a rule that if a person violates a lav, and then the Torah writes explicitly that if someone violated the lav, you have to do something to rectify it. For example, God says don't steal, but if a person steals, the Torah says return what you stole. So that automatically takes away the punishment of Malchus, because the Torah uprooted that lav from Malchus by the Torah giving a remedy. We're going to have a very unique application to a lav shenitek la'asei, according to Rab Chizda, regarding this Metzoira that was already outside the Machne Yisrael, and he entered. Even if he entered b'mezid and he entered with Hasra, he will not get Malchus. Really, we will see that's subject to a machlokes tanoim, and it's going to be, that will be the whole heart of today's daf, will be a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. Really, what is the source that a Mitzvah has to be banished from all three camps? Will it be from the same pasuk that Reish Lakish brings, or will it be from another pasuk, as we'll learn out? We're going to have the Gavaldik Shita of Rab Shimon quoting that Braisa, that a Balkeri is like a Zav. And we'll speak out when we learn exactly what a Zav means, but a Balkeri is something very common. Anytime a man has a seminal emission, he is called a Balkeri. True, it's very easy to get out of that tumah going to the mikvah, kosher mikvah, and then waiting until night. But a Balkeri, according to Rab Shimon, may not be in Machne Leviyah, which is part of the issue about going today up to Harabayas, aside of we not knowing exactly where the Makam HaMikdash was, but certainly you have to go to the mikvah, and V'oid will speak about that, and a lot more. It's going to be a very important daf in Hilchas Tumah V'Tara. I just want to really go back to the beginning of the sugya, which began on daf Samach Vav Amud Beis. So again, the question is, where do we know that Pesach is doiche tumah? That was the question. No one debates that din. Once you establish that din, we will also apply it to Tamid because of the Gzeira Shava Mayada Mayada, but Pesach Gufa Minolan. So Rabbi Yechanan brought a pasuk from Baha'aloischa. In Baha'aloischa it says, regarding the whole Pesach Sheni, Ish ki yeh tamei lo nefesh. So the man, since he's tamei, he is not allowed to bring the Pesach Rishon, he brings the Pesach Sheni. So is Medayik Rabbi Yechanan, Ish. Only a Ish is going to be, so to say, exempted from, not allowed to bring the Pesach Rishon, and then the Tikkun will be to bring the Pesach Sheni. But if it's the whole Tzibur brings it on Pesach Rishon. To which Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yechanan, I agree that Ish is excluding a Tzibur. But how do you know how to apply that? Maybe Ish is Nitcha to Pesach Sheni. If the whole Tzibur, meaning the Roiv of the Tzibur Ostamei, lose, not they can bring Pesach Rishon, nor they can bring Pesach Sheni. The tzibur is going to be excluded from the ish and baha'aloischa, but how do you know in such a positive way that they don't even have to wait to the Pesach Sheni that they can bring into the Pesach Rishon? That was the kasha that Reish Lakish had Rabbi Yechanan. So he brings a pasuk in Parshas Nasi. The Torah there is speaking about the concept that there are certain people that because of their tumah, temporarily they are banished from being in a certain camp. They can't even be there. And the pasuk specifies three categories. And I'm reading in the second to last line in Samach Vav Amud Beis. I'm reading the pasuk. The shalchu min hamachnem, banished from the camp, kol tzurua, amitzoida, v'chol zav, v'chol tamei lenefesh. Just speak quickly, a zav. A zav is not a balkeri, right? We had this, I think it was on Daf Lamed Hey, Amud Beis, we had clear, we have, especially for doctors, to describe what's a zav. It's a certain unhealthy seminal emission that does not happen through an arousal, and the zera, the semen, the Gemara gives different ways how it does not even look like a healthy zera. And if it happens once to a person, he has the status of a balkeri. But if he has a second emission, either on the same day or on the second consecutive day, 2 days, one after the other, then he's considered a zav. He's a zav in which he's tummy for 7 days. He has to count 7 clean days, making sure he doesn't have any additional seminal emissions. And then he has to go to a mikveh, and he has to go to a mayim chayim, he has to go to a spring, and then it's at night and he's tahor. And if he has 3 such emissions, either on the same day or during 2 days, or at least one on each day, if they are consecutive, that's called a zav. Then that's called a major zav. Not only does he have to wait the 7 clean days and go to a mikveh and a spring water, but he's the one who has to bring kippurim karbanos on the 8th day. That's a zav. So v'chol zav, v'chol tamei lenefesh. So says Reish Lakish that if the Torah is teaching you the general rule, before we know the differences of camps that we spoke out now in our intro, but if there's a general rule that these 3 types of people that are tamei have to be banished from the camp, let the Torah only speak about a tamei mace. And Reish Lakish is taking it as a given that a zav and that a mitzoida is considered, they have a tumah that's a lot more stringent. And taka, well, think about it. The fact that a zav can only go to a mayim chayim, the fact that the Zov's tumah comes from his own body. We'll see in the Gemara in many details why a Zov is considered the most chamer. A Metzoida, oy gewalt, the procedure that a Metzoida must undergo to become tahor is the most you'll ever find. with the body shaving, and then 7 clean days, and then the whole ma'aseh with the birds, and then another full body shaving. So asks in Pashut, the Torah should say that a Tamei Meis should be expelled, and I would automatically know that a Zav, that a Mitzvah for sure has to be expelled from the Machna. That was the Kasha Reish Lakish had, for which he says it must be that there was taka time that a Tamei Meis won't be expelled in a Machna. But even nevertheless, the Zav and the Mitzvah will be. So the Torah needed to specify the Tamei Meis. Now, when will you have a scenario that a Tamei Meis, which normally will have to be banished from a Machna, is not? That will be the case. That if the majority of the people are Tamei, then the card by Pesach, the Pesach is brought nonetheless. Pesach is Doicha Tuma. In that scenario, Tamei Meis will be allowed to enter the Azara. Wow. Right? If the Rov of the Kahanim who are doing the Avodah, they'll be in the Azara. So that's the source. So Rabbi Yechanan's source is from the Ish and Baha Aloischa. Ish goes to Pesach Sheni. Tzibur stays Pesach Rishon, and the Shlakish is going to be analyzing what appears to be extra examples of Tumah in the Pasuk in Nasai, and the reason why Tamei Meis is not enough to be written because there is a time that the Tamei Meis won't be sent out at all. Asks the Gemara up to 3 lines from the top of the Amid. Let me follow your logic. I'm going to use the same logic, and I'm going to checkmate you. Hold on. The Torah gave 3 types of Tamei people. Why couldn't the Torah say only that a Zav and that a Tamei Meis should be Vishalchu min HaMachna? The Torah should not have to mention the first, which is called Tzurua. The Torah should not have mentioned the Mitzvah. And I'm back to my question. And I'm going to tell you by my own that Zav and Mishtaleach, and Zav is considered someone who's less stringent than a Mitzvah. And we'll see later in the Gemara why indeed this is so. The Mitzvah will be considered the most chamur. So Mitzvah like called Shrein. And let me go with your answer. So you're going to give the same answer. So you're going to say, the reason why the Torah gives another Mitzvah is because there is a time that a Mitzvah taka has to be banished, but the Zavin and the Tamei Meisim won't be banished. I'm going to use your same logic. Now, a Tamei Meis is taka not banished. But why don't we say, the Ezazeh Pesach Haba B'Tumah? What happens if the Rov of the Tzipur, my friends, they are Tamei as a Zav? What were to happen? So let's learn from this pasuk that they bring the carbon Pesach, and it's not true. It's not true, guys. The Rov Tamei is Doicha Pesach is only by Tamei Meis. If the Rov of Tumah is because of Tumah Zav, it's not Doicha Pesach, but it's mamish the same pasuk. And Abai goes further. And if you're going to tell me, Hachenami, yeah, that Rov Tumah's Doicha Pesach is for Tamei Meis and it's for Zav Taka from this verse, it's not true. How do we know that from Torah Shemal Peh? We have a Mishnah. The Mishnah is later in Pesachim and in other places that Pesach haba b'tumah lo yoichlu mimenu zavim zavois nidois v'yoldois. Even though if they eat taka, normally if someone is tummy who eats a kachim chevre, remember you get kaddis. So even though kaddis petura means they're not going to get kaddis, but the Mishnah says that they might not partake. And if the source that Pesach is doicha tumah is from the pasuk in Nasai, is from the fact that the Torah gave 3 examples when really 1 would have been enough, that same logic should have been applied to Zav. Torah should have written Tamei Meis and Zav. And the only answer for that will be, why did the Torah write Mitzvah? The answer will be is because there are times that a Tamei Meis and a Zav can be in the Machna, which we know is not true, and a Mitzvah cannot be. So this whole limud is not correct. Now, Abai is not answering why indeed did the Torah have to specify those 3. We will see that now in the Braisa. The Gemara is going to deal with that. But you can't use the fact that the Torah gave these 3 examples when really, theoretically, all 3 were not needed. That is not the source at all for Pesach being Doicha Tumah. So Ella, Omar, Abaya, I'm going to say.
Just to clarify.
Yes.
Nobody has any question that Zavin and Mitzayras will never be allowed to participate in Carbon Pesach.
That's correct, Danny.
Right?
Clear.
And the reason being because they could just make it up on Pesach Sheni, or?
Well, let me word it differently. By the way, a Zav will bring a Pesach Sheni. No, we're speaking about a Tzibur.
In a year when the Tzibur is Tamei and they bring it to Tumah, would the Zav and the Mitzayra then be able to make it up on Pesach Sheni?
Yes, they can make it up on Pesach Sheni, but they know it's the roiv, the tzibur, that's doicha tuma, is only Tamei Meis. Good. So now, Elam Rabbi, let's go back to Rabbi Yechanan, because Rabbi Yechanan had a great limud. And like we mentioned, Reish Lakish doesn't debate that the ish is excluding a tzibur. We just don't know how to apply it. Lo'ila mikra kama, meaning I'm going to go with Rabbi Yechanan. The ish and bahal loischa. And what Elama, 1 second, Reish Lakish had a gavaldik kasha. Why don't we teach ish has the opportunity to make it up? That means if an individual was tamei, he can make a Pesach Sheni. If the tzibur became tamei, then it's called koreach mekan v'koreach mekan. Not Pesach Rishon, not Pesach Sheni. That would work. That would explain the ish. Why don't we say that? He says gavaldik. Because in Cain, nichtlev l'rachman, it would have sufficed for the Torah to write ish ki tamei, period. The Torah did not need to write the word lo nefesh, and he's going to speak it out beautifully. Lo nefesh lamali. Why do you have to say lo nefesh? The chi tema, that high lo nefesh lahachu da'asam. That what? That only hatamei meis, only if someone's tumas because of corpse, then nitchala pesach sheni. But shar tameim loy means that no one is saying that they can bring it on Pesach Rishon. But maybe it would mean that if someone has any other tumah, they cannot bring the Pesach Rishon nor bring the Pesach Sheni, but that's not true. That's not true. Like you just spoke out. No, v'hatanya yachol lo yiyah oisen Pesach Sheni ela tamei mesim, or like the Torah only gives these two examples, or only someone that was b'derech rechaika. But you might have thought that if someone did not bring Pesach Rishon, not because of amazing, but because they were unable to, because of other tumas, because they were zavin, because they were mitzurayim. If you remember, we learned in Masechtas Nida, if a man, God forbid, has a relation with his wife while she's in Nida, he becomes Tami Mamish like her, minayin, that they are allowed to bring the Pesach Sheni. And the answer is because it would have sufficed for the Torah to write just ish. Ish also would have excluded the tzibur. Ish is fakert. The double ish is including that any type of tamei which did not allow one to bring the Pesach Rishon will also have the option, nishdak and farfallen, to bring the Pesach Sheni. So now we're back to the kasha. If the exclusion of a tzibur would have meant not Pesach Rishon nor Pesach Sheni, then the word lanefesh is superfluous. Now, how does lanefesh answer it? It's mamish brilliant. But lanefesh is extra. Ish ki yatamei. And indeed, anyone who's tamei can bring the Pesach Sheni. So lo nefesh, the kasav rachman lamali, the whole lo nefesh is being maramis, the limud of Rabbi Yechanan. Elohachi ka'amar. Ish nitchala Pesach Sheni. Ve'ein tzibur nitchala Pesach Sheni. And now you have to add this. This without the next three words, the lo nefesh is extra. And it must be that when God is saying that the tzibur is not pushed to Pesach Sheni, it means that they bring it now. Ela avdi betuma. You'll see how these three words will answer the lo nefesh. Now that we're saying, which is the emes, that they do it now. So on that, Hashem wants to add another nuance, that the chi of the tzibur betuma betmei meis. When do we say that the tzibur, since it's a tzibur, right? So they do it now. That's only if the roiv of the tumah is coming from Tamei Meis. But if the roiv tzibur is tummy with shar tumais, like a zav, then that they can do. That they can do. But Danny, what could they do? They can bring by Pesach Sheni. They bring by Pesach Sheni. They always had that option. But the lo nefesh, based on the fact that a Tamei roiv is allowed to do it, the Torah has to limit it. Yeah. Roiv tzibur it pushes away, Tuma pushes away Pesach, Pesach pushes away Tuma, only Tamei Meis. So we have Rabbi Yechanan, we have Reish Lakish, we have a Gavaldik Kasha on Reish Lakish, and we have Abaye explaining how Rabbi Yechanan will respond to the Kasha of Reish Lakish. Now what's beautiful here is
where we're up to right now, Rabbi, there's no practical difference between Reish Lakish and
Rabbi
Yechanan yet, right?
Very good. Very good. But perfect. That's a whole daf. 1 second. The difference is where they learn it from. And as we're going to see, the Chizda statement and the rest of the daf will all be around where do we learn the dinner that we mentioned in the intro, that even though the Torah speaks about certain people that are tamei needing to be temporarily banished, not allowed in a certain camp, it's not that whoever's tamei is banned from the same camps. We're going to see, no, a Metzoida is banned even mishalosh machnas, even from Machna Yisrael. A Zov, and according to Rab Shimon, a Balkedi is banned from 2 machnas. They may not be even in Machna Levia. Tamei Meis is only banned from Machna Shechina. The question will be where we learn it from. And as we will see, one Tana will learn it from the Pasuk of Reish Lakish. And it goes hand in hand, because if the pasuk of Reish Lakish, of the pasuk in Nasi, is used to teach you how each group is banned from a different camp, you cannot use that pasuk to teach you, like the way Reish Lakish did, that a Tamei Meis can be in the Azara for Korban Pesach. You can't use a pasuk for Tulemudim. It's going to be like a glove. It's going to be beautiful. According to the other limud of Rabbi Yechanan who learns the din that Pesach is doicha tuma from the pasuk in Baha'alois, from the pasuk in Nasi. Don't forget that Reish Lakish had a good question on the pasuk in Nasi. Why did the Torah have to give 3 examples? He's free now to use that pasuk for the limudim, as we'll learn now. Oh, beautiful! And the way we segue into that is by a statement of an Amoira. Says the Gemara. I know it's late, but we said the whole daf by heart. Amar Rab Chizda. I want you to know that even though we learned the Metzoida may not be in the camp, but if the Metzoida entered Lifnim Mimichitzasai, wherever that camp is, we didn't explain it. But if he violates this banishment, he should get Malchus, Pater. Now, where do we learn that from? This is Gavaldik. Because since it says, Badad Yeshev Michutz Lamachne Moishavai, he shall dwell in isolation outside his camp, shall be his dwelling place. So says the Gemara, says Rab Chizda, Badad Yeshev means Levada Yeshev, go be in isolation. Michutz Lamachne Moishavai, go dwell right outside the camp. And as we will see, this is fundamental. This pasuk is extra, because as it says in Nosoi, "Vishalchu min hamachna," we know that he has to be banished from the camp. Why does the Torah have to write "Badad Yeshev"? So says Rab Chizda, "Hakasav nitkoy la'asei." Now we spoke this a lot in the intro, and all of the Rishonim, the Tosfos, that's the whole Tosfos over here. Lav shenitek la'asei, for which you're not chayiv malchus, normally means that if I violated, God forbid, I stole. And God tells me, if you stole, return what you stole. You know when I can fulfill that assay? Only if I violated the law. If I never stole, I cannot return a stolen property. That's called the lav shenitik la'aseh. If there's a positive commandment that is only it only turns on if I violated the law, that takes away the malchus. Do the assay. This badad yeshev is not only to be fulfilled if a person violated a law. A Metzoida has to live in isolation. He has to go outside, whether he entered or not. This is not your normal lav shenitik la'aseh. If he entered, you can still go back out. Go back out. And a chanami. This is not an asay that only is turned on if there was a violation. But since the whole pasuk is extra, that's the limud. And we'll see later in the Gemara why we would have known that a Metzoida is anyways banished from the pasuk in Nasai. This pasuk is extra. What the pasuk is telling you, that if you violated you Metzoida and you entered the camp, go back out, and that will rectify the violation, and you're not going to get malchus. Says the Gemara on Rab Chizda Eisvei, it says in a brayso, not like that. Metzoida shenichnas v'mechitzasei be'arboim, which is really 39. He gets flogged. Likewise, Zavin v'Zavais, that if they entered Lefnim Michitzasan, and we know that their banishment is not as bad as, but okay, they have to be banished from Machna Levia. If they entered, we're speaking about B'mezid, with Hasura, they get Malchus, Ba'arboim. The Braisa, however, says that Tamei Meis is allowed to enter Machna Levia, because he was never banished from Machna Levia, and not only that, says the Braisa, V'loi Tamei Meis Bilvad Amru, El Afilo Meis Atzmai. A Meis can be in the Machna Levia. It's not that we bury people on Harabayis. No, we don't. But we don't bury anyone in Yerushalayim. One of the ways of determining where the old rules of Yerushalayim was is that if we find someone buried, then we know that this must have been outside the walls. But as far as this lav of banishment, it doesn't even go to a mace. And where do we know it from? Shenema vayikach Moshe's atzmos Yosef imay b'mechitzasei. I do want to add one detail, Lahoyer, that there's a big machloikis And we Hasidim and the Sfardim and many others, we follow the side that Kivrei Tzadikim don't give off Tumah. Just lahoir, that according to that, there's no proof at all. The fact that Moshe had with him Atzmos Yosef, Tzadikim b'misasim kuroim chaim, according to those who apply this in halacha, this brayso doesn't work. But most shittas don't hold that way. And stam lahoir, that when the Rebbe was the one overseeing the building of the oil of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe made sure that they build it in a way that a kohen should be allowed to enter. Now, if you go with that tzaddikim don't impart tumah, and therefore kahanim, for example, can go there, then the oil would have had a roof. Now, other oilim of our rabbeim taka have, but the Rebbe and why is there a wall around the Frierdiker Rebbe? Now, the rest in the oil, there's a wall not to hold the panim. There's a wall because once you have a mechitz of 10 tfachim, so then even if a kohen is within the 4 amas, he's not considered near the kaver. And that will be based on the nigel. According to the Bachlal, I heard from Rabbi Asher Weiss that in Bavli you won't find the source for that. I think the source that in halacha that kivrei mesim don't give off tumah is from the Yerushalmi, because here we're saying that Yosef really imparted tumah. And nevertheless, he was in the oil of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was in Machne Levi.
Okay. Are you talking about the actual tzaddik that's in the grave doesn't give off the tumah?
Yeah, the tzaddik. In other words, let's speak today, Rav Baruch, about kohanim. Kohanim today are not allowed to impurify themselves with corpse tumah, even if they have that impurity anyways. A kohen cannot enter a Jewish cemetery. And by us, if a kohen is going to visit the resting place of a tzaddik, then they go. The Rebbe. Then they go. Now, they will have a halachic issue of how to get there. But in the resting place, now other people disagree with that. That's an ongoing, respectful argument. And coming back over here. So this is, here we're going to focus on the beginning, that this brayso says, Yoloi Kal Boim. Rab Chizda cannot go against the Tana. Says the Gemara Tanoihi that this statement of Rab Chizda is really subject to our Machlokes Tanoim. And now the Tanya says, Badad Yeshev Levadoi, right? Yeshev, isolation, meaning Shaloi. Badad Yeshev means Levado Yeshev, live in isolation. What does an isolation mean? It means Shaloi Yil Tamei Machedim Yoshvim Imoy. There are other types of Tumah people that are banished. Azav is banished. Tamei Meis is banished. But the pasuk is telling you, don't think that they are all banished into the same area. No. The place where the Mitzoida is banished into, only the Mitzoida. It doesn't mean it can be him and his fellow Mitzoida. You can have two Mitzoraim being together. But only that category goes to that camp. In other words, and whatnot, Azav is not going to be banished to the place where the Mitzoida is banished. A Tamei Meis, which is banished from a camp, is not banished to where the Mitzoida is banished. The Mitzoida is banished the most. As we know, he's banished even michutz l'machne Yisrael, outside any Jewish walled city, walled from the times of Yeshua ben Nun. Now, okay, maybe I got the Mitzoida is unique. He's banished the most. But the other two categories of a Zavin and a Tamei Meis, you might think that they are both banished into the same camp, which means that neither of them can even be in Machne Leviah. Neither of them. No. So Talmud Leimer. So now we're focusing on the pasuk in Nasai, where the Torah says Vishalchu min amachne kol tzura v'chodor v'chodor meila nefesh, and then the pasuk continues V'lo yitamu es machanehem. In plural, they should not make their camps tamei. That implies that each one has their own camp. Litein machne lezeh u'machne lezeh divrei Rebbe Yehuda. In other words, each one of these three have their own designated area. And what is that? The Tamei Meis is banished only from Machne Shechina, but he's allowed to be in Machne Leviah. The Zav is banished not only from Shechina, also from Leviah. And the Mitzoida is the only one that's banished from all three Machnes. Okay, but guys, the point is that the Badad Yeshev that Rab Chizda used as an asay shenitak, as a lav shenitak la asay, it's not extra. It's not extra according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Badad Yeshev is the pasuk that makes it clear that the Mitzoida has to be chutz mishalosh machnes. He's taka the only one there. The only type of tuma that is b'chutz l'shalosh machnis is the Mitzayra. How do you know it from, according to Rabbi Yehuda? From the Badad Yeshev. Appreciate the moment Badad Yeshev is needed to teach you any other din, it's no longer elaf shenitek la'aseh, because this aseh of being banished, go out, is not activated only when you violate it. B'chlal, a Mitzayra has to go out. When he becomes a Mitzayra, go leave the three machnas. It's only an alaf shenitek la'aseh if it's extra, but Rabbi Yehuda uses it. The beauty is Rab Shimon, and Rab Chizda will follow Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon says that ain't a tzarech. I don't need the Badad Yeshev to tell me that the Mitzayra has to be chutz mishalosh machnas, more than the other two, that he's alone and nice. I don't need that pasuk, because I can learn all of that from the pasuk in Parshas Nasoi. Oh, it's amazing what we started today's share. The source that Reish Lakish used, which will not be like Rab Shimon, as Taka, why did the Torah have to specify all three? So the answer that Reish Lakish give on top of the Amid is, that's the source, that the Pesach is Doichatuma. No, Rab Shimon says the pasuk specified these three types. From here we learn that they're all banished from different camps, which is great, which means you don't need the Badad Yeshev. So the Badad Yeshev now is extra. So this can now become the Laf Shenitek La'aseh, which will be the source of the law of Rab Chizda. Good. So let's go with the first wide line. Now, Reish Shimon is explaining why all these three examples are not needed when it says Vishalchu min hamachna. The Torah could have said Yoimad Temei Meis. Mamish, the same kasha of Reish Lakish. Torah should have says Vishalchu min hamachna Temei Meis and Va'al Yoimad Temei Zov. If Ani Yoimad, that if Temei Meis and Mishtalchem, so Avade Zov and like Kol Shchein. The Gemara will explain in a moment why Zov is more chamer, but Zov is more chamer. Lama Nemar Zov, because they're not banished to the same camp. You can't group them together. If God would have says Vishalchu min hamachna Temei Meis, if you would have learned Zav from a Kal v'Chomer, right, from a Temei Meis, then they would have been in the same camp. Temei Meis only is banished to the Machna Leviyah. Zav may not be in a Machna Leviyah. The Zav has to get out of the Machna Leviyah. So the Hashem had to say a separate category. Vishalchu min hamachna, the Temei Meis and the Zav continues the Tanach of Shimon. We're not done yet. The Yomer Zav al Yomer Mitzayra. Temei Meis has to be written. Zav has to be written. But why did the Torah have to not begin with the words Kol Tzarua? Because even if God would not have written Mitzayra va'ani Yomer, I would have known on my own that Zav and Mishtalchin, so Mitzrayim loy Kol Shchein, as the Gemara will explain soon, why the Mitzayra is even more chamor than the Zav. Lama nema Mitzayra li'teloi machna shlishis. In other words, Rab Shimon uses the pasuk from Parshas Nasai. Obviously, Reish Lakish cannot follow Rab Shimon. But the beauty is that since he already learns from that pasuk that every type goes to a different machna, that the Mitzayra is banished from all three machnas, I know that he's in isolation. So now we go, so kishuhu oimed badad yeshev, that's extra. This will be the base of Rab Chizda. Now we're going to use this akos of nitkoy la'aseh. But now we have to analyze Rab Shimon. Why does Rab Shimon say that the Zav is more chamer than the Temei Meis? So therefore, theoretically, the Torah could have only written Temei Meis. So says the Gemara, "My chumrei the Zav mit Temei Meis," and the answer is because shekain tuma yoytza olav migufay. The fact that the source of tumah is from the body of the Zav itself, that makes us view him as a more serious type of tumah. Temei Meis, the whole pshat Temei Meis is that a mace outside of me imparted tumah to me. Says the Gemara, hold on, you're right. In this aspect, from that angle, Zav is more chamor, but let's go on the other side. Adarabba, 3 lines from the bottom of the Amid. Temei Meis should be also viewed as more chamor, or even more chamor, because of shekain ton hazah shlishi v'shvi, like we spoke on in the intro. A Zav, true, even a Zav, meaning he had 2 emissions, either on the same day or on 2 consecutive days. He has to have 7 days before he even goes to the mikveh. He goes to the mikveh on the 7th day. Zav of 2 times doesn't eat karbanos, but even during those 7 days, he doesn't have to have the ashes of the red heifer sprinkled on him. So Temei Meis, to become pure, needs that extra step. So that's called more chamor. So says the Gemara, you're right.
Emanating from the body, how is that a chumrah? It's a Balkari also is emanating from his body, and that's the weakest of all of them, right?
We're not talking about Balkari yet. We're comparing a Zav.
I know. I'm just saying that aspect
Yeah.
thing that it,
Yeah, that aspect would make a balkedi just as chum, as a zav. But 1 second. So says the Gemara, you know what? If the Tamei Mace would have only meant a Tamei Mace that has to be banished from Machna Shechina, you're right. Then Abshimon wouldn't have had that Kal V'chomer. But second to last line, the trader writes, the Yishalchum and Amachna, it's easy to, everyone can see the pasuk on Samach Vav Amid Beis. If you have a non-art scroll Gemara, you can look on the other side. That it says like this, Yishalchum and Amachna, Kol Tzarua, V'chol Zav, listen, V'chol Tamei Nefesh, the Vav is extra. The trader could have said, V'shalchum and Amachna, Kol Tzarua, Zav, and Kol Tamei. The Vav, we would have understood, and. The trader could have written Tamei. The Torah writes, V'chol Tamei, and from that we add something. Guys, who has to be banished from Machna Shechina? Mashiach is coming, we have to know these halachas. Not only a Tamei Mace. Tamei Mace is an Av. What happens if someone became Tamei through a Sheretz? If a Sheretz, there are 8 dead type of creeping animals that when they die, they impart Tumah. A Sheretz is Tamei on the level of an Av. If a dead rat has halachic contact with me, I become a Rishon. I only need 1 day. Not only do I not need 7 days, I don't need the Hazor Mechatos. Right? It's a very light tumah. Someone who becomes tummy through a sheretz may not be inside the temple complex. They have to be banished until they undergo the purification process. Now it's gavaldik. So a tamei sheretz, right? Zav is a lot more chamur. What was the counter? A tamei mace needs hazor shvi. They don't. Not only do they not need the hazor, they don't even have 7 days. Since the tamei mace, the tamei nefesh include sheretz, now you're good. And vizav chamur misheretz. And the Gemara says, "Oh, not so quick. It sounds good, but you're not off the hook yet." Oh, my chumre, what are you going to tell me? How is it more chumr? Like you mentioned before, the amran that a zav is tuma yoytze migufay and the sheretz is not migufay. No. Adarabba, I have one problem. There's one area in which the sheretz is more chumr than the zav, and what is that? Sheretz chumr shekei metama ba'oines. What does oines mean? Normally, we know what oines means. Here again, the word oines is a little bit different than usual. If a dead sheretz touched me, touched a keli, whether in a regular way, whether in the most unusual, unforeseen way, I don't care. Halachic contact, sheretz, and the person is a tamei sheretz. Zav, not so pashut. For a zav to become tamei, it's not only that he needs to have this unusual seminal emission called a ziva emission, but there are details to that. If the zav did something unusual, like he ate a lot of food or he did a lot of exercise, and there was some sort of external stimuli to which we can explain why he had such a seminal emission, he will not become a zav. So since the way he becomes tummy is limited to a non-oinus emission, non-oinus again doesn't mean the way you normally think. A zav never wants to have a ziva emission. It's never a willful emission. Fakert, we're saying a zav means a seminal emission without an erection. The word oinus means is that if some sort of activity can be linked, external activity can be linked to the fact that he had that emission, then we won't count that as an emission. We don't have any of those limitations by Tumah Sheretz. So there is one aspect into which the Sheretz is more chamer than the Zav, answers the Gemara. No. How do you become a Zav? So we said you become a Zav by having 2 such emissions, either on the same day or on 2 consecutive days. Hold on. What happens if a Zav has 1 emission? He has the status of a Balkeri. For him to become tummy like a Balkeri, I don't care if it was Ba'inus or not. In other words, the first re'iyah of the Zav, Taka, he won't have to wait 7 clean days. But don't forget, it's a Tumah HaYoytze Migufay. Tumah HaYoytze Migufay is still viewed as more Chomer than the Sheretz. For the first emission of the Zav, even Ba'inus, it's number 1. Let's read it inside. Amri Daf Samach Zayin Omid Beis, that Ki Hai Gavno, Zavnami Tamuya Metama Ba'inus. There is one scenario where even if there was one of the 7 types of external stimuli that the Mishnah gives in Zavin. To which we say that if that happened, the emission doesn't bring about Ziva, and that only means he doesn't go from emission number 1 to emission number 2. That only means that he doesn't have to count now 7 clean days. Or if it's the 3rd time, it only means that he doesn't have to bring Karbonis on the 8th day. But for the first emission, like Rafuna taught us, to Amar Rafuna, Ria Rishayna, Shel Zavim, Armetame, even Bo'inus. So that answers the question. So yes, Ziva is more chamur than Tamei Sheretz. And therefore, the Torah, this is all explaining the sheet of Rab Shimon. So if the Torah would have written Kol Tamei Lo Nefesh, I would have known Zav. Why does God have to specify Zav? That's the source, that they don't go to the same camp. They're not banished to the same camp. The Mitzrayah is banished Michutz L'Machne Yisrael. The Zav is not banished there. If the teacher of a Zav, the Tamei Nefesh is banished Michutz L'Machne Shechina. If the Tamei Meis would have been the teacher, Tamei Sheretz would have been the teacher to the Zav, then I would have banished them both to the same camp. But a Tamei Nefesh and a Zav may not be in the same camp. The Zav has to be banished even more. So the Torah spells it out in Parshas Nasi. And then let's go back to the Braisa. Then Rab Shimon continued, and why did God have to specify Mitzrayah? That was his kasha. If the Torah would have written Tamei Nefesh and Zav, I would have known Mitzrayah. Asks the Gemara why. My chumra the Mitzrayah mi Zav. Here their answer is very simple. A Mitzrayah has mamash that which no one else needs. Part of the process of the Mitzrayah becoming pure is he has to have priya. Priya means he has to have a chup. That's a punishment. Priya means that he has to go with his hair unshorn, uncut. Prima means that he has to rent his garments. From now on, we're just going to use the words priya and prima. And unique to a Mitzrayah, that asr b'tash m'shamita. And as Tosfos reminds us, when is the Mitzrayah asr b'tash m'shamita? Really, that's a machloikis. Either it's only during the 7 days in between the first body shaving and the second full body shaving, according to other opinions, that once you have a Mitzrayah that's called muchlat, there's a Mitzrayah muskat and a Mitzrayah muchlat. There's not time, we'll explain this another time. But once he becomes muchlat, from then on, he's already asr b'tash m'shamita. That's not the case of a Zav. That's not the case of a Tamei Lo Nefesh. Right? Of course, if the wife is a nida, then the couple can't have relations. But if the man is tamei, other than Mitzrayah doesn't disallow a couple of having relations. So these are the 3 areas which makes the Mitzrayah more chamur. The Gemara is not happy. The Gemara adarabam. By Zav we find unique chumras. Zav chamur shekein metame mishkav u'moishav. If the Zav sits on that which was meant to be sat upon. If the Zav lays on that which was meant to be laid upon. Even if there isn't contact, even if there are 10 mattresses, not only does he impart tumah, but that which is holding the weight of the Zav becomes tummy on the same level of a Zav. Oy gewalt, wow, that you don't find by a Mitzrayah. Another din, umetami klicheres beheset. The rule is that earthenware utensil, we learned this in Pesachim, only becomes tummy if the source entered its airspace. True, no contact is needed, but let's say if a sheretz touched the outside of a klicheres, it's not tummy. However, there's something called hesed zav, any article whose weight is supported by a zav, even without contact. If I'm standing, and on top of me I have a box, and on top of the box there is a utensil. All of that is resting, is being held up by a zav. Even though I don't touch it, even though I'm not moving. It's called hesed. Hesed means the fact that the item is being upheld by the koyach, by the existence of the zav. He imparts tumah, and listen to the novelty. The utensil, the klei cheres, it's laying on the box or it's laying on my back, but only the outside of it is touching the zav, directly, indirectly. And you would have argued that since the tumah is not going in the airspace, for sure it will not become tamei. You're not moving it. If you're moving it, you're moving the inside as well. The chumrah of a zav is that just by the fact that the zav is holding, is allowing something to rest on him, something is resting on the zav, that's called tumas hesed. And even if it's an earthenware utensil, Rashi uses the words, we consider him holding something a all-encompassing touch. He's touching it all over. So again, that's a chumrah. Answers the Gemara, you're right. I almost got the word correct, but Danny forgives me. Wow. So Danny's stuck in Florida. So the answer is, encompassing. Oh, so let's go back. Just like we had before by the Tamei Mace. If the title only would have been referring to a Zav, you're right. You're right. Zav has something that a Mitzvah doesn't have. But by the Zav, the title also adds the letter Vav. Amar Kra Zav would have been enough, but it says Vichol Zav. And Rab Shimon says that's L'Rabbis Balkeri. A Balkeri is also banished from Machne Leviyah. A Balkeri doesn't give off Mishkav Moshev. There's no Hesed by a Balkeri. Now wow. A Metzoida is a lot more Chomer than a Balkeri. Okay. And let's just touch it up. And the Gemara says, okay, if you're going to say Kida Amaran, which sounds so clear, Priya, Prima, also Betashma Shamita. No, let's find one thing. There's one area where Balkeri is more Chomer than a Metzoida. What is that? How much semen needs to leave the body for that person to be a Balkeri? How much of a blemish of tzaras is needed to render the person or the garment or the house? We learn Rambam. There you have to have the size of a bean. In other words, whatever the blemish of the tzaras is, if it's smaller than a minimum size, it will do nothing. But by the keri, by semen, the most minute amount that is omitted from the body renders that person into a balkeri. That's a chumrah. Answers the Gemara, it must be that the Tanach Rab Shimon, which is whom we're focusing on, Savaloket Rab Nassan. Rab Nassan has a unique opinion. The Tanya, now we're not comparing the shiur of a bean to the shiur of the zera, but Rav Nassan holds that there is also a minimum amount of zera, both if it's a ziva emission or if it's a normal balkeri emission, and less than that, you won't become tummy. So there is a minimum amount. The Tanya, Rav Nassan Oimer, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, that zav tzarech kechasimas pi ha'ama. In other words, the discharge has to be equivalent, right, to the amount necessary to block the orifice at the tip of the male organ. Now, even though but so holds Rab Nassan. Now, that's only by a zav. We already said that zav is not enough to exclude the Metzoida because there are certain to include through a kalbo chamer because the zav has chumras, but also the iskash balkeri lezav. According to Rabbi Nassan, if you have less than that shiur, whatever that is, of an emission of a balkeri, he will not become tamei. Period. So yes, if the Torah would have said zav, I would have known that a Metzoida is banished. Why did God have to write kol tzarua? And the answer is to tell you that the camp to which the Metzoida is banished is not the same camp to which the zav and the balkeri is banished. The Metzoida is banished even the chutz l'shalish machnes, which is the whole going back to Amadal, which means that Badad Yeshiv is extra. And now we go back to Rab Chizda. Badad Yeshiv is extra. Rab Chizda allows us to use this extra verse to interpret it as a lav shenitak la'aseh, that if a Metzoida purposefully entered the machna that he's not allowed to be in, he's not going to get malchus. I just want to speak out. And if anyone knows the answer, please let me know. If you're listening online, my email is rabbi@chabadsola.com. I have a klotz kasha, and I don't know the answer to it. If a balkeri, according to Rab Shimon, is banished from Machne Leviyah, explain to me how the Levium had a married life during the 40 years in the desert. Even if you're going to tell me that it's not that they can't have a marital relation, but the moment they had the marital relation, they have to leave Machne Leviyah. It's a big doichik to say that all the Levium needed to leave that way. By the middle of the night, and I'll tell you more than that, when we go to the Sugya and Shabbos of Matan Torah, and in Nida that we learned that if semen that originated from the man, but if a man has a relation with his wife, if that semen leaves the body of the wife, remember, she also becomes tummy on the level of a balkeri. And not only that, that was the whole sugya. The reason why God told us to wait 3 days is that we know al pi Torah that semen can remain alive in the woman's body up to 72 hours, which is why before Matan Torah, the mitzvah of Perisha was for 3 days. So you're telling me that a Levi had a relation with his wife, Mela, the Levi himself, he has to go to a Machne Yisrael. Where's the modesty? What, he's knocking on his Yisrael's neighbor at 2 a.m, I'll pick Kabbalah after midnight. What are you doing over here? And she has to stay there for 3 days?
Rabbi, in what we learned just now, I didn't see anywhere where it said clearly that a balkeri has to leave Machne Leviyah. Did we say that? I mean,
Yes,
maybe
Danny, I'm
you learn
sorry.
from
Yeah,
the
second
Zav.
Florida. Yeah, no, of course, because that was the whole Tana. That Rab Shimon is saying that the reason why the Torah gave 3 different examples is because each one is banished to a different camp. The Zav, he says, is banished to Machna, banished from Machna Levi, and then but how is Zav more Chomer than Mitzvah? The answer is because Taka, if Zav only would have meant Zav, then we would not have learned Mitzvah from Zav. Zav is more Chomer, Mishkav Moishav and Hesed. Zav also includes the Balkedi. Clear?
I know it includes it, but does that mean that the Balkari also has to follow the Zav in this regard?
Let me tell you, Danny, not only is that the meaning of Rab Shimon, I'm saying nowadays, the Rebbe did not advocate us going on Harabayis. The Rebbe was against us going to Harabayis. Letters, clear, because the Rebbe is of the opinion that we don't know exactly where the Beis HaMikdash stood. But even those who, and God bless them, God bless everyone, that they go to Harabayis, the prerequisite, guys, we're not worried about Ziva. We're not Zavin, right? And by the way, if we were to be Zavin, then we need to go in a spring water. But everyone is told that a man has to go to the mikveh. He cannot have marital relations. He has to wait until night, and he can go the next day to Harabayis. Yeah, Balkedi. The whole issue of when you put a note into the Kaisel Hamaravi, many places can say that if the Kaisel Hamaravi has a din of the Temple Mount, then if you're a Balkedi, mamish, the halacha l'maisa, you can't touch it. Most opinions say you can touch it, but make sure that if you put a note on the wall, don't stick your finger in the cracks, because the moment you enter, you're going on a Temple Mount. Yes, a Balkedi may not go on Temple Mount. This is a klotz kasha. If you have the answer, please let me know. Okay, Mike. Now the Gemara is going to use now the same logic that we had in the discussion to ask something that was not brought up. The pasuk begins Vishalchum in Amachne. The beginning is not sorua. It says kol sorua. Why did you have to write kol? The word v'kol sorua, the kol lamali. And every time we said a v'chol, we added something, right? So by the Tamei Nefesh, we added Tamei Sheretz. By the Zav, we added the Balkedi. What exactly is included with the Mitzvah? Nothing. Only the Mitzvah is outside 3 machnas. So the Gemara answers, either the Chsiv kol Zav, Chsiv nami kol Sarua. A big chiddush. You're not going to find this that often. In other words, the concept of having something written symmetrically appealing, which is something that is used a lot in Mishnayos, but we're having this in a pasuk in the Chumash. Now, obviously, there are many levels to Torah. Once you go to a higher level of Torah, this answer will not suffice. But al pi nigla, that's good enough of an answer. Okay. Now, 1 second. The Gemara is asking a question now. Shaper coming up Shimon. No, the question is on Rabbi Yehuda. Like, why did Rabbi Yehuda Taka have to learn it from Badad Yeshev? Why wasn't this verse good enough for Rabbi Yehuda to learn that the Mitzvah is banned from all 3 machnes? So answers the Gemara that the Rabbi Yehuda needs the pasuk and Nasai. Rabbi Eliezer Oimen. Yochol Dochaku Zavin Mitzrayim v'Nichmas Azara bePesach haba beTumah. We're speaking about when the majority of the people, when the call is Tameh, and they are allowed to bring the carbon Pesach. And Nachmal Dani, that's for you. We mentioned that's for Tamei Nefesh, but not Zavin and Mitzrayim. And the taka, they may not bring it. We had the Sanamad Aleph, but you might think that they're Chayiv Kares, because that's the rule. If someone is Tamei and they enter the Azara, the Chayiv Kares. So the Torah says, that this is a little bit of a putting of together of Reish Lakish, and everything else we learned today. So we do juxtapose them. When a Tmei Nefesh has to be out, then is where Zavin and Mitzrayim mishtalchin on the level of Kadis, But ein Tmei Mesim mishtalchin, it's during the moment that there is a heter, whether it's Hutra, whether it's Dechuya, but when the Tmei Nefesh are going to be in there, ein Zavin and Mitzrayim mishtalchin, meaning not that they may enter. Dani, clear Rashi, means that if they enter, they're not Chayiv Kadis. Beautiful. Let's go by it. Let's hop another few lines. Amar Mar, we're quoting now Rab Shimon. Zav, and the Chol Zav, LeRabbi's Balkedi. Says the Gemara, don't think that Reb Shimon's opinion was not accepted. No, Misayeh, like this is the base of Rabbi Yochanan, the Pesach in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan, he said 2 dinim. Big debate whether they are related or not. A little bit late. Din number 1 is Mechilos Leiniskachu. Under the temple complex, guys, we're going to learn this in Midrash, they made tunnels. Now, these tunnels, says Rabbi Yochanan, they were not sanctified. which is great because those tunnels were used by people who became Tommy while they were in the temple and they escaped through there. And once they entered there, they're already not in a holy place. Then number two, whether related or not, Rabbi Yochanan paskins that Obal Keri is mishtaleach chutz lishtei machanois, and not only from the temple area. Today, Obal Keri is not allowed to go on Harabai is. Says the Gemara Meisvei, says in the Mishnah in Zovim, Bal Keri is kimaga sheretz. L'choyre, what does that statement mean? Does that not mean l'machanoisam, that both of them are banished to the same area? Now, Tamei Sheretz, what did we learn today? Only has to leave Machna Shechina, is allowed to be a Machna Levia. Here we're saying a Balkeri, so this is a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, it's a kasha, well, you can say the Mishnah is not Rab Shimon, but does it work? The Gemara says, no, it works with Rab Shimon. The meaning of the Mishnah and Zavan is litumasam. They both share the same amount of tumah, which means they don't need 7 days. The Balkeri doesn't need 7 days. Magasheretz doesn't need 7 days. Says the Gemara, for that you need a Mishnah. That's a pasuk in the Chumash. Litumasam. Hai tumas erev ksivbei, hai tumas erev ksivbei. The Torah tells you how long these people have to wait. So the Eloma, therefore again, for the Mishnah to innovate something, it must mean lamachanoisim, but that's a problem. That's equating the Balkeri with the Tamei Sheretz. That would mean that a Balkeri is allowed to be on Temple Mount. Saying, no. We know that they both don't have to wait for 7 days. That the Balkeris Kamaga Sheretz, meaning Ma Maga Sheretz Metama Bo'oinis, as we learned, no matter how there was halachic contact with his will, against his will, the person, the item becomes a Rishon. Af Balkeri, not like a Zov, a Balkeri, if semen, the normal Zeta leaves a body, man from the wife, right? We don't even hold there's a shiur, then they'll become Tamei, even Ba'oinus, not like a Zov, that's Chaparam because it's a Hemshech. Meisvei, that same Mishnah in Zovin, continues Daf Samaches, Boyel Nida, which becomes Tamei like the Nida, God forbid if someone is Boyel Nida, Kitamei Meis. And here again, Lamai, we're trying to say that the Mishnah in Zovim is not speaking about Lamachanoisam, because then it's going to contradict Rabbi Yochanan. Well, Ilamet still means Litumasam, that they both are tummy for 7 days. Again, why do I need a Mishnah? It's explicit. Hai Tuma Shiva Ksivbei, Hai Tuma Shiva Ksivbei. So Elalav Lamachanoisam, that they're both banished to the same camp. The problem is, Umida Sefer Lamachanoisam, right? So Reishanami Lamachanoisam. So you see that a Balkeri only is banished from Machna Shechina. A Balkeri can be a Machna Levia. So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Mida Iria. Could be that the Sefer, you're right, it must mean Lamachanoisam, but I'm going to insist that Rabbi Yochanan will learn that the Reish of the Mishnah is, right, that we compare them in their Tumah, not for the Zman, but for the way you become Tumah. Oinus. Guys, to be continued. We're going to have a lot of Agadah. Guys, we're learning this time, we're learning Matzah Shabbos. We're learning from 7 to 9. Monday will be the normal time. I'll be by the Rebbe Monday. We'll learn from over there. And we're going to have a lot of Agadah in the next daf, just to let you know. Guys, this is very important. So I still have my question. How did the Levium have a normal married life?
Is it possible that the Levium didn't really live in Machna Levia? Like, certainly in Eretz Yisrael, no one lived on Harabayas, right? So that was an issue. It's only in the Midbar that's the question, right?
Yeah.
So
where does a leper who has a seminal emission, or a leper who touches a corpse and has a seminal emission, go?
So he has to go to the more stringent place. He has to go to outside Machna Yisrael.
All right, thank you.
Guys,